Hello and welcome to Watches Tonight. This is the 1916 Company. I'm Tim, she's Ryan. This evening, new vintage and the vanguard of tomorrow's collectibles. We chat live and I share your viewer wrist shots tonight on Watches Tonight. While you're warming up, do me a favor, check out my Instagram, Tim_Mosso. Help me out with that underscore. Tim Mosso, 60-second watch reviews. Tim Mosso and Squash the Pug. Tim Mosso and an occasional car show. But guys, it is the official after party of Watches Tonight. Now, viewer wrist shots number one, I asked you answered, starting off with a longtime friend, Rick R. from Chicago with his emerald green MB&F Legacy Machine Perpetual Evo. I love it. I don't know if it's shock resistant enough to actually fall, but at the same time, if you drop into the Great Lakes, it is 80 meters water resistant. Len M. keeps the time in his McLaren Artura thanks to Doxa's 300T Professional. Note it is McLaren Orange. Jeff S. shares both sides of his, well, this is the other MG, Moritz Grossman, with a Carry Voudelainen dial, and you can see it's equally exciting on both sides. It's the best of both. We got Stephen P. and Carolyn joining with double Rolex at Martha's Vineyard, looking good. We got James and his Rolex Oyster Perpetual greeting the new day with coffee in Sydney, Australia. Jonathan B. impresses with the totally unexpected Monsieur de Chanel with high jewelry. And then there's me with my Moser Pioneer Center Second in Cosmic Green. And of course, I'm wearing the 40 because my wrist is tiny. I'm wearing it now. Guys, send your wrist shots to Monday Mailbag at the1916company.com to see your pieces on these pixels. Let's see what we got here. Edward, Moto Gunner, Soma R, Enrique Cassiano, Jim Millett, Burbing Hard, Miroslav, Junior Johnson, 911 Euro. Okay, Ryan, new vintage and the aging of modern watches. What comes to mind when you think new vintage? Like, this term gets thrown around. What does it mean to you?
So for me, it's kind of like, you know, anything, I mean, if you want to be very specific, it's like from the 90s, you know, it's kind of like the 80s is now true vintage, and now the 90s is kind of the new vintage. And for me, I come from the car business, so for me, it's always like, what goes with my Testarossa? Okay, well,
that's fair. I was born the same year as me, 1984, by the way, the Testarossa. But at the same time, I'm going to probably broaden it a little bit to be like anything post-Quartz Crisis. So think of it this way. When I was starting to listen to classic rock radio in high school, I had my own car, I had my own radio for once. The rotation was Led Zeppelin, Boston, AC/DC, and the Rolling Stones. That was vintage rock back in 2001. But have you noticed how classic rock's been playing Metallica, 90s grunge, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Foo Fighters, and The Offspring for almost a decade now? And Metallica itself, featured here, look a little bit grayer than I remember them in their prime. The same phenomenon is visible in collector cars where Radwood, like Ryan said, the 80s and the 90s scene, it's become like a cultural love fest, not just the cars, but the colors, the clothes, the music. That's now a big deal. It's vaulted various previously used cars into the exalted ranks of 60s muscle and like interwar classics. And so this is happening with the watches, the 80s and the 90s, I'd even say the early 2000s. Just as the Eagles can't monopolize classic rock forever, the watches of the 50s, 60s, and 70s can't claim exclusive right to vintage status. So today we're discussing our favorites. Okay, so what are some watches that come to mind when you think of new vintage? If we're going to define it as like post-80s, what are like some highlights? Taken from the Book of Ryan.
I'm having trouble coming up with some specific ones. I mean, for me, it's kind of like, you know, I'm thinking Seinfeld. I'm thinking a Breitling, rouleau bracelet.
Or like Gordon Gekko wearing a gold watch this big.
Yeah, definitely a little bit chunkier than we're into right now. The big boy, like a Hublot or an AP offshore, something bigger.
Okay, so let's think of it this way. Like 1990s. Here's an example. The discontinued Patek Philippe Neptune 5080. Now this was, in its day, an attempt to broaden the Patek Philippe. We even jump back a little bit because the more you see the bracelet, the more I like it. But it was an attempt to broaden what Patek Philippe sports watches could be. It was before the Aquanaut by a year, but long after the Nautilus. It has a bracelet somewhere between beads of rice and a fully integrated bracelet, but it's so ornate and intricate, and some might even say fussy, that when you combine it with the leaf hands, the Roman numerals, the salmon dial, and the engine-turned bezel, some people thought maybe it was just a little bit overwrought. I love it.
I'm very into it, particularly the juxtaposition of an integrated bracelet with Roman numerals. It's kind of an interesting take on design.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of the kind of watches that were popular in the 80s and the 90s when two-tone was all the rage, this does seem to play to that sensibility. And I don't know if just 1996 and the late 90s was like the turning of the tide on this type of style, but this watch, which wears beautifully, by the way, just never got the due it deserved. These days, in that condition with salmon dial and original factory tritium, it's a collectible. And that's why it's a photo from an auction house. Now, this is different from 2025 watches in general. I would say if a watch is very unlike something being made today, it's easy to call it new vintage, even if it isn't that old. So let's take the 1994 Gerald Sonnerie. This is a watch that, frankly, can be a little bit hard to swallow by modern sensibilities. Do you see anything there that might be a little bit divisive?
It's a little thick.
It's a little thick. It's actually not as big as you think. It's like 36 millimeters.
Yeah.
What about that bracelet?
That doesn't look like the most comfortable thing, that's for sure.
That's like that looks like the thing the guy who created, like, the old man, was it John Hammond, who created Jurassic Park in the movie? That's like something a rich eccentric would have been wearing back in, like, the early 90s, back when Jurassic Park was a blockbuster. And this was, believe it or not, the world's most expensive watch at about $1 million with every option, which this one has. I would also say this isn't the wrist aesthetic of our era. That's me wearing it. And I'm not going to lie, that is a little bit of a Marmite sensibility aesthetically. But you can see the octo case predated Bulgari.
Yeah.
Also, great movement. If only you could wear it upside down.
Beautiful.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Fully
very
engraved.
unique finishing, very Art Nouveau.
How weird is it to have an automatic winding minute repeating tourbillon in 1994?
Or ever.
Yeah, exactly. I'd say that too. By the way, check out the strikers. Those bridges engraved to look like grapes. How cool is that?
It's beautiful.
Let's acknowledge our live chat. Did your live chat close up? Okay. We got Cull Obsidian saying the Neptune feels like the watch Gordon Gekko's boss would wear. Was his boss Philippe Stern? I don't know. Jeff S., thanks for the new watch, Armand. We always like shout outs from our customers to our staff. And by the way, how do people reach out to you, Ryan, if they're looking to make contact about any watches they see here or elsewhere?
Typically, Instagram's the easiest way to find me.
And what is your Instagram handle?
Ryan E. Spalding.
Very cool. All right, by the way, Jim Millett, our friend from the UK, saying join us on the Talking Time with Tim Mosso Facebook group. Definitely, Tax in the Box. Joining us from London today, we got Sutats saying two-tone Cartier Santos belongs in this. You're probably not wrong. Along with one of the gridded bezel, Cartier Pachas. Like the full grid dial.
Yeah.
That feels like new vintage. All right. Wolfgang is not a fan of that Gerald Genta, by the way. I would also say another way to consider new vintage is like early work by a modern independent master. So a great example of that would be the Debitune DB1. And by the way, anyone who re-rhodium plates that patinaed and burnished case, there's a place in watch hell for you. Leave that as it is. Do not touch it. How cool is that? We never see white gold without the rhodium plate. Like, that's old school white gold with the rhodium wearing off.
Yeah, I think the patina is what makes it so interesting. Like, because everyone would be different at this point now.
Yeah, like you couldn't get it like that if you tried. That's the product of genuine love. Oh my gosh, I do have a DB1 to show you. It's not quite that cool. But I mean, this is an example of early work by Denis Flageolet, and it is so diametrically opposed to the design sensibility of 2025 Debitune. I consider this new vintage.
Totally. The lugs in particular, what's unique, but I would say that the dial, he's really been consistent, and some of the later releases, current releases, are kind of reminiscent of that dial.
Yeah, we're seeing a little bit of it with the reborn DB8, for example, or Journe, the Carpe Diem. 1997 piece unique for a special client. If you landed one of those, you'd probably have the brass ring of new vintage, because that is the summit of Olympus right there. I mean, that's really cool. And I'm not a huge Journe fanboy. Okay, Vacheron Overseas Self-Winding. This was the first overseas, and in my opinion, kind of the coolest overseas. It was way too fussy, and you could see that in the bracelet, but it was also the easiest fit. 37 millimeters, 8.4 thick, and a chronometer certified GP movement. I mean, really neat watch.
Yeah, that's great. You see why these are still so popular, and they kind of, are re-releasing this because it's it was always great.
And the nice thing about it too is that anyone can wear it. In theory, there was a ladies size at the time. Ladies, you don't need it. The one size, the 37, is perfect for anyone. And a wild military dial for someone who wants something vastly different in the same package. I can't think of a more jarring shift other than maybe the second half of Old School. Did it seem really like somber, like that movie lost a gear in its second half?
I don't know if somber is the word I would use, but it is super cool.
The old guy dies, Will Ferrell gets divorced. It seemed like there was this weird tonal shift, but you get that with that military dial on the overseas. You know, it's like if you want a very different feel from the outside of the watch, which is very traditional, petite, 1970s derived, and then you've got this crazy Arabic numeral dial.
Yeah.
And some of them are tritium. So that's a great watch, but that's very different from the modern overseas. Zenith Chronomaster caliber 410. I mean, today, this would be 44 millimeters. Back then, it was 40.
Interesting. I wouldn't have thought that. And it's interesting to see like how their design has changed over the years, because this is not what anything they make looks like today.
No, and I miss it. This design came out in 1994, and the first year for the Chronomaster, it was a white lacquer dial, it was a gold case, it was a very elaborate and elite catalog topper. And in the 1990s, you were able to get it later on in steel, and this wonderfully 1990s bracelet might be the coolest way to own it, or at least the most versatile. But I think this was just about the perfect watch. In 1990s sense, yeah, you've got gadroon bezel, you've got a stepped lug, but something about this has aged better than most 90s styles.
Yeah, the bracelet's unique. I don't know if I've really seen something similar. I also I'm like really noticing the day and the month at the 2 and 10 o'clock is different too.
Yeah, this was this is a cool watch, because in the 90s, Zenith was probably making more movements for customers than it was making for its own watches.
Exactly.
Let's jump to our live chat box, see what people are saying. Local Hero Ed, each overseas has a unique charm. Not sure there's a bad choice, unless you need something smaller, in which case the first generation is the best. Also the only chronometer, also the only tritium dial. Let's see what else do we have going on here. Abdul noting that Zenith is perfect in a 40. Sonny, why don't you like the 430 dates? This is controversial. How do you feel about 430 dates?
I like it because it blends in with the dial, and I wear an Explorer because I like the symmetry, and I think it keeps the symmetry there, but I understand it could be frustrating if you're used to the 3 o'clock date.
Yeah, there are 3 ways people take their dates. None at all, replacing an index, or those intermediate dates. I always thought that the intermediate date at 430 was a very Zenith type of design trait. Like, they did that for years and years. It feels that it's like germane to the brand. But there is a purpose. On something like a 50 Fathoms, it doesn't replace a loomed index. So it makes maybe more technical sense there. I like it because I'm a Zenith fanboy, but that's just me. We got Jim saying great Zenith. We got HRM joining in. Soterios joining in from Greece, staying up late with us. I appreciate that. We both do. BNS saying I don't mind the 430 date. Enrique Casiano saying 430 dates are overhated. That's an interesting way of phrasing it. And then a question from Austin Long. Why do you keep interviewing Kevin O'Leary? We don't. That was one shoot cut several different ways. What else is going on in the box? Whole milk. I like dots for dates, a la Ox und Junior. I'll be honest, while I like the idea, they can be hard to read, the Ox watches.
Yeah.
Like, you have to count each individual dot up to the current dot.
Right.
Which, I guess if you have a lot of time, sometimes people say more engagement with your watch is better. But if someone told you, like, tell me the date right now, or I'll kill you, you'd die.
I guess I live without a date, so maybe that's just me.
I have no date right here. You can see this is my Moser. It's 3 hands and only 3 hands.
Exploring.
And then we have a question, is Team Mosso on Ozempic? No, and you should realize by now that I'm so cheap I would never pay for it. What else is going on here? We have Stevenson. I like the 430 date. Norm M. 430 date would get less negative press if they were level. So you mean if it were literally vertical inside the dial? I've seen it. I don't necessarily think it's better, but it exists. What else is going on? Abdul saying 3 hands, the way to go. He has a doctorate of engineering, so I believe him. Okay, Tag Heuer. There is no more 90s brand than Tag Heuer. And this was a great one. Note, it's Heuer branded. There's no tag on this dial. This was a 1996 launch to celebrate the initial public offering of Tag Heuer as a briefly freestanding company. And it was the 1964 Carrera re-edition, no date, 36mm, super strong lugs, tritium dial, and a rare use of a moonwatch caliber in a Carrera. It's actually the Le Mans 1873. So a lot to love here. This is a watch that has not aged at all. While Tag Heuer is a very 80s and 90s brand, this is not a dated design.
No, it's beautiful. And I love how simple the dial is, even though it's a chronograph. Usually chronographs can be super busy, but this isn't at all.
Yeah, and I think this is an example of a watch that was pretty close to perfect, because if they were to do this again today, the watch would look exactly the same. Maybe it would be a little bit bigger, but it would be proportionally identical. This is pretty close to a perfect 1990s chronograph, something that you can wear today without having to explain like how you got lost on the way to laser tag. Okay, Omega. Guys, you knew this was coming. This was like the sports watch of the 90s. The sports watch of the 80s. This was the sports watch of the 1990s. Omega Seamaster Diver 300 meter. I had one with the sweetest tritium fade you've ever seen in your life. How do you feel about people who ask for tritium fade to be swapped out for a new dial?
I'm not into it. No, just keep it. That's the best part.
The only weird thing about this one, and you see it all the time, is that they met in the middle and they swapped out the hands. Now that's not always elective. Sometimes the hands can't be reused, but it's always a little bit weird. At bare minimum, you gotta keep the dial, especially on these early pieces, because after 1997, Omega switched away from it. What else is going on? Wolfgang saying, started with Tag back in the 1990s and currently own 3. H-Arm
Nice.
saying the Omega Dynamic 3 is a 90s legend as well. And I guess so are the Schumachers. The tritium ages so nicely. BNS saying, this is iconic 90s for me along with the Constellation. What do you think of the Constellation? I mean, I gotta say that I've warmed up to it with time. I don't hate it the way I used to.
I think I'm still in the hate camp, but I think I need to take some time to play with one to really form a real opinion, because in photos I don't always love things. I want to see it in the hand and on the wrist.
I found that the Griffin Claw Constellation looks better the smaller it gets. Once they start getting big, like the Double Eagles, it's too much.
Yeah, I can see that.
I'm going to qualify my feeling about the Griff and the Griffin Claw Manhattan design as date but not marry. Okay, now, Omega. Guys, let's go back to that Omega Seamaster. Let's face it, that was the dive watch of the 90s, made famous in GoldenEye. And then later on, in GoldenEye. I had that game. My friend and I, we wore out a set of N64 controllers playing that in Mario Kart. I was good at Mario Kart, terrible at the shooters. But on the other hand, it's amazing to think this came out 2 years after the movie. If that happened today, heads would roll. Oh my God. Okay, let's jump in there. We got Revan and Kisan. I love my Omega Constellation 2000 limited edition. It has Roman numerals on the dial instead of the bezel. I see your live feed shut down. What do you think here? Let's see what these guys are saying and take some hot takes.
He has a 1997 Omega Constellation Manhattan, was my gateway as an engagement present. Only 35 millimeters. That sounds great. And let's see. Jumbo Jet Pilot. The Constellation looks a lot better in person. Good to know. I'll have to confirm that.
Abdelmir saying Pierce Brosnan made Omega look sexy in the 90s. That's true. He really
fair.
did. I would say that in terms of looking like you were born for the role, more than any other Bond, he probably did. And if every Bond he was in were as good as GoldenEye, he would have been the new Sean Connery. But it was like, it was like the Omega Gray side of the moon. There was this huge spike in demand and wait lists, and then as many as you want.
Yeah.
All right, Neil saying, I love my 007 Titanium. Enrique saying, N64 GoldenEye is a classic, and local hero Ed, SNES Mario Kart was the best. I had it. It was a little bit before my time. I did have Super Nintendo, but almost immediately after N64 came out, and I'm like, whatever, you're retired. And then right here we got a comment about the PIaget Upstream. Very early 2000s, but I think we can count that because it is so unusual. I love the Upstream. Interesting fact, because Piaget was only working in gold when they launched the Upstream, they actually had a contractor who was responsible for making the steel parts of the steel models.
Interesting. I mean, it makes sense.
World's wildest clasp, too. I can't think of many other watches whose cases are also the clasp. I wish I had a picture of one. Girard-Perregaux Laureato 8010, guys. This came out in 1995 during the Macaluso era of Girard-Perregaux, which was also a golden era. This was the first automatic mechanical Laureato. Believe it or not, for its first 20 years, it was a quartz watch. This was a real sports watch with 100-meter water resistance, stainless steel case, automatic winding, integrated bracelet, and they did not short you the tritium. Can we go back to the front? 36-millimeter watch, though, like all in this genre, it wears larger. This thing is killer. Get your hands on one of these and never let it go. Yeah, Audemars Piguet Star Wheel. This is a watch that does look very 90s. I'm not gonna lie. Do we have a picture? Yep, there we go.
There it is.
All right. Okay, so this is very 90s and yet somehow timelessly beautiful. The case and the bezel, up to that point, I'm like, okay, this is like, you know, Ross Perot running on a third-party ticket in 1993. But then you get inside and you're like, oh my God, those sapphire discs, the guilloche, the finishing of the carousel. This is beautiful. This is timeless. This is forever. So it's a weird dichotomy of something that's very much of its age and something that looks absolutely up to the minute appropriate for the modern era.
It's a very interesting design that it's not very, it doesn't have a certain era in mind. It's kind of unique in that it's very timeless.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. It's based on a clock. So once
Right.
you've got a watch based on a clock, you realize it's already stood the test of time. Wandering hours, a Renaissance clock complication. Now, these are incredible watches, and I remember back when they sold for like 15 grand, I should have bought 3. They're expensive now. They've been discovered. But if you can find one that's in really great shape, hang on to it, because whatever it's worth today, it will be worth even more tomorrow. I'm not saying this because I want you to look at watches like investments. I'm saying this because I don't want you to get boxed out of the market. There's a lot of stuff I wish I bought back when I could still afford it and when it was still affordable. Okay, HRM saying this is 15 years before its time. Abdul saying that is a timeless watch. Cull Obsidian, I don't know if the Star Wheel is slept on anymore. Seeing them blow up in popularity. Yeah, but I can also remember back at Watch You Want when we sold a 6239 Paul Newman for like $95,000 and we thought we were flying. So something that's expensive can still become much more so with time.
Totally.
Okay, local hero Ed, love a Star Wheel. Lots of cheap imitators now, but they don't take the shine off the original, which shows its class. And then we got Amit saying 177 in the room, only 44 likes. Let's get that up. Yeah, that's right. Like and subscribe. I don't say it often, guys. And then we have Abdulmir saying, imagine telling my 10-year-old son that AP used to make watches like this besides the Royal Oak. They used to make them and actually promote them too, and not bundle them. What else is going on here? Wristful Ignorance saying, if I save up, maybe I can afford a Chinese clone of a Da Vinci. And then we got James Blonde in the box. I guess that's Daniel Craig. All right. We also have a shout out to the AP 25535 Skeleton Chrono. Good piece if you can find one, but that makes a Star Wheel look almost common. All right, guys, I asked, you answered. Let's take a quick look at some of yours on mine. Wrist shots number 2. Assad joins us from Lake Como with his Skydweller. We got Nathaniel K. of South Florida with his wood effect dial Santos Dumont XL exploring London. Danielle, and Dog Friend, I actually don't know the Dog Friend's name. Appreciate the Mont Blanc Minerva monopusher chronograph. 10 months in the spots, finally back on his wrist, and thank goodness for that. Gary S. and his Zin 3006 Hunter's chronograph. Prepare for a moose hunting trip on a goatskin strap. And then Darth Muppet forwards this Omega Speedmaster Apollo 8 shot in a tribute to the late Jim Lovell of Apollo 13 fame. Send your wrist shots to Monday Mailbag. See your pieces on these pixels. Okay, new vintage and the aging of modern watches. Tell me a little bit about like how you explain to a customer who asks for the first time what you consider vintage. Like we talk about new vintage, what do you consider like classical vintage?
I think it depends on who you're talking to. For me, because I'm born in the 80s, I'm like definitely older than that. So I'm like 60s and 70s, probably early 80s at this point. You know, if you're thinking about watches, I would say, you know, something great like a GMT Master, you know, the original.
Like an old Concord Hands GMT Master or something.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Cool. Or like a Big Crown Sub.
Totally.
Yeah, that's cover of the auction catalog type stuff. So when we talk about modern watches, a lot of times we talk about watches that are the oldest products from relatively new brands. So let's take a look at modern masters. When we're talking about the independent watch movement, with the exception of Sven Anderson, Vincent Calabrese, Philippe Dufour, there are not many that have a history predating the 1990s, and most don't predate the 2000s. So consider the first de Bethune, again, the DB1. Again, theirs is absolutely to die for with that burnishing, but I've actually got one on the table tonight. If you take a look right here, what's interesting about this watch is that it is super slim. Oh, can we go to the... Well, when they get that up and running, we'll talk about that. But my point is, this is a watch, oh, there we go. This is a watch that was only ever made in 49 examples. And that's spread over several different case metals. And you can see that this is as different from a modern de Bethune as it gets. Note, round case, solid lugs, solid dial, solid case back. Technically, you could call it a customer caliber. It was developed by Denis Flageolet and F.P. Journe when they were partners at THA during the 90s. This movement was made famous in the Cartier Tortue Monopoussoir from the CPCP collection, but this is about as different from a DB28 as you can possibly get. And because it is the first DB product, that's why I'm comparing it to a vintage watch in the sense that it's new vintage. It's the oldest version of a new brand's product, or the F.P. Journe brass movements. Now, we actually get a lot of interest in these. Who's the customer for a brass movement Journe these days?
Definitely someone who's more interested on the investment side, but also really appreciates watchmaking.
Does he wear his watch?
I would say if you're looking at a brass movement, probably not. But that doesn't mean you don't wear it. It's just not a daily wear.
Okay, so it's a situational watch for like a red bar or a meetup or a dinner with FP in Geneva.
100%.
By the way, if you're going to dine with FP in Geneva, brace yourself. What else is going on here? We have Truman Burbank saying the current Rolex 4131 is even more efficient with the Chronergy escapement. I have yet to review one of the newest Daytonas for obvious reasons, but I will report on that shortly. Sashi, where I'm from, the Rado Diastar and the ceramic watches were the luxury watches. That's true. Diastars,
That's so true.
I mean, they're almost supernatural with the scratch resistance.
Yeah. And the Rados are still popular overseas, not so much here, but they definitely were very popular back then.
Yeah, Rado, if you want to repatriate like a 50s or 60s Rado, it probably is going to come from overseas in the Far East. They had a huge market there.
Yeah.
But the Diastar is great because, like you said, like they were the thing. They're still the thing. You can pull an old Rado Diastar out of a drawer full of forks and knives, and it will not have a scratch on it. Oh my gosh, those things.
Durable.
Now, the brass movement Journes are interesting because I actually would say that the guy who owns this probably wears it sometimes, but Instagrams it full time. That's how I would profile this owner. He's very proud of his watch. He's just cautious about where he deploys that thing. They are too valuable to look at as other than a store of value. I would hope they're enjoyed though, and it's important to get watches out in the world. This is one of those things you don't wear when you're in an unfamiliar neighborhood or Paris or London, but I would totally rock this at like Madison Watch Week.
Exactly. It's great for an event. I don't know if you'd wear it just out to dinner, but a specific event, it's perfect.
Yeah, out to dinner with FP, and again, brace yourself. Roger Dubuis. Now this is a guy who spent most of his life making stuff for others, and I think it was F.P. Journe who once said something to the effect of, I was sick of selling gold to swine. Well, Dubuis, for most of his career, was building stuff for other people, and he founded Sogem, which later became Roger Dubuis, with Carlos Diaz in 1995, and this is arguably the iconic early Dubuis. This is the millennial special edition, but it is the first generation Sympathie by Retrograde, and I mean, that watch is perfect for 37 and a complication and Geneva seal.
Incredible. Anything retrograde makes me smile, so I'm into it.
Yeah, you take a very inert complication, a calendar, and you suddenly make it exciting.
Yeah.
Plus, look at the top of the dial, Bulletin d'Observatoire. That is also a Besançon French observatory chronometer. So it's double certification, Besançon and Geneva hallmark. But that's like new vintage today. Cull Obsidian saying, I know someone with a brass movement Journe, and depends on how devout you are when you can wear it if you are Muslim. I guess so. They do have gold on the dial side, but some of them are also platinum, but I guess the dials are always gold, so that's problematic.
Right.
Then we have Sean saying, not a Star Wheel fan, but I like Urwerks. Urwerk is coming up. What else do we have going on here, Ryan?
Looks like Miroslav. Artie was perfect from the start of how things can change.
Yeah, got to agree with you. I don't understand why they don't just have like a heritage collection. Like make the crazy, gigantic skeleton dial Lamborghini and Pirelli tire themed watches for like, you know, like your volume customer. Then just have like a line of the Hommage, the Condottiere, and the Sympathie, and just make those continuously for the person who bought RD like 25 years ago. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, it fuels our pre-owned market, so we're not mad about it, but it could be cool to see it reinvented.
Yeah, in a world where Daniel Roth is back, why not bring back like the original RDs? Like one model per year even. Come on. Throw me. And speaking of which, actually, I have an example of a DR right here, and this is a great one. This is the C187 Tourbillon, and I'm actually going to fire it up because it would be indecent of me to show you a Tourbillon without actually running it. Okay, so this is the original DR C187 from the late 80s through the mid 90s. Now what's great here is that this is a rare white gold example in great shape, but it's also one of the units that has the case back dials where you've got the calendar and the power reserve. A lot of them didn't have that. Now this watch is only about 42 millimeters lug to lug, so it's really easy to wear. Now you could go out and buy the new Fabrique du Temps revival model, but this is the real thing. I don't mean to say the new one isn't real. I mean to say that this was created under his own guidance and hand. So this is a little bit different, and it uses the Le Mans tourbillon base that he designed, whereas the new one's a Fabrique du Temps movement. So this is an opportunity for someone who wants something special that's not yet Journe priced. Okay, let's read some of these memories right here.
MX Okizi?
Sounds right to me.
My first expensive watch, the 16750 GMT Master. I was post-teen, tricked my parents for pocket money and saved up to buy that watch. It also reminds me that I discovered Pat Metheny group jazz.
Yeah, well, that's exactly jazz group right there. We got the Ghosty Yiddish Gambino. Forget the show starts early now. Glad to catch it live. That's right, we're now 4 o'clock. And thanks for posting my new Santos Dumont. You got it, my man. Abdul is saying that is the ultimate reversible watch, that Daniel wrote, and I have to agree. Jim loves it, says it's stunning. And local hero Ed, my favorite neo vintage watch is the AP Metropolis. That is pretty cool. Michael M's a fan. What a gorgeous watch. No kidding, we got another DR piece to show you soon. Also important to note, Vianney Halter. This is another guy who's a little bit controversial. Not because he has Journe's proclivities, but because he's more of a mad scientist who jumps from project to project, and not always after the project is finished. So the Antiqua that came out in 1998 really might be the most distinctively different design of the 1990s. And yes, Jeff Barnes deserves credit for this as well. But if you have one of these, especially if it still says Halter Barnes on the dial, that is super new vintage.
Super interesting.
Would you call that steampunk?
I would call it steampunk, totally. That's exactly the word I was trying to think of.
And I think Christian Lass's wife did all the engraving on those dials back in the day. Urwerk! We heard it before, now it's on the screen. What do we have to say about Urwerk? The UR101 and the 102. The 101 famously nicknamed the Millennium Falcon, and you can pretty much see exactly why right here. Jump back. It's seamless. Like copyright infringement. Disney might have a suit. But my point is that this watch, up until recently, I saw these things selling for like $20,000, $30,000, even in precious metal. A great way to get into the earliest pieces from Baumgartner and Frey. And you got to remember, back in 1997, when they exhibited at Basel, there was nothing else like this.
No, and there still isn't.
Yeah, there really isn't. You know, granted, it wasn't until the 103.3 that they truly hit their stride by showing the whole mechanism, but this is an important piece as the formative watch, and I think the first is a flag that flies forever. It's always important to own the first.
Yeah, limited edition, first one.
And it's the Millennium Falcon. You know, all your friends whose eyes glaze over when you talk about your watches say, oh, and it looks like the Millennium Falcon. They're like, what? Viewers chats number 3, John A. of Colorado has a 1963 Seagull chronograph that you probably didn't know existed. William R. shares another watch that's new to most with his Corum Admiral's Cup Tribute Brazil and a chronometer. I love that. Caleb B. and family are at Fallen Leaf Lake with Swiss, German, and Japanese machines stacking up right there. Matt F. and his Seiko fuel with coffee while exploring Vancouver. I guess you need something to keep you warm in the cold, white north. Benoit C. of Amsterdam watches tonight with me and Josh Thanos with Zenith A384 Revival chronograph. Send those wrist shots to mondaymailbag at thewatchbox.com if you prefer vintage, or the 1916company.com if you prefer new vintage. Okay, new vintage and the aging of modern watches. Watches that are unlike what you can buy from the current manufacturer. And I think we can both agree that this Master Compressor, JLC Master Compressor, is nothing like what they offer today. Guys, show the graphic real quick. There we go.
There it is.
You got to admit, that was a strong style. And a little bit like that Gerald Genta Sonnery we showed earlier, it did not appeal to all tastes. But it was a completely original effort. It wasn't a retro watch, a re-edition, or a revival. And when you take a look at what these offer today, they're really quite elaborate watches where you have this unique 1/2 turn crown that locks the case and gives you 100 meters water resistant. And because it only compresses and decompresses the seal, like on a Panerai crown, on a Luminor, it doesn't thread the stem through the seal again and again. So it reduces the wear and tear on the seal mechanism. It's also easy to manipulate if your hands are wet, sweaty, or gloved. And then the cases are beautifully substantial with solid gold medallions on the back. And this is the Master Compressor Geographic, which is sort of a hybrid of a world time. Let me try to fix that right there. A hybrid of a world time and a dual time. It's kind of got elements of both, but very different from the watches JLC makes today.
Totally. Too bad.
Yeah, I would like to see those come back. But again, that's why it's new vintage, because this style that we've got is something that's so different from what's available today that the 20-year distance doesn't seem as pronounced as the disparity in design between then and now. And I think Magali Maitreyer, who was one of the most influential designers in the industry at the time, a young woman who designed almost every JLC men's watch over a decade, I think she will be retroactively celebrated like Jacqueline Demier. I think she really deserves that billing. All right, up next, an Omega.
An Omega.
Yeah, we got the Ville coaxial rattrapant. In a way, this feels... Something about this was destined to be polarizing. Can you guess why?
It's hard to read.
I was going to say the dial looks like Mickey Mouse, but yeah, it's hard to read too. And then there's those stepped and fluted lugs, the size of the thing. But I had such a watch crush on the Ville coaxial rattrapant from 2005. That's a piece unique in platinum, by the way, made for James Bond. Or maybe a James Bond villain. It has 007 on the counterweight. Does this seem more like something Bond or like a megalomaniac would wear?
If Bond wore it, it would like also have a parachute in it.
Maybe, but it just doesn't seem his style, except, I don't know, maybe Roger Moore could get away with it. He was classically trained as an actor. But I loved this watch, and yes, they were fragile back in the day, and that was probably the Achilles heel, but oh my gosh, did I have a watch crush on this thing. There was something about this that represented everything I loved about high-end watchmaking, right down to the Frédéric Piguet movement base that went into it. And I might be the only fan to this day, and not in the only fan sense, but this watch to me will always be a hero piece. But it's new vintage, because there's nothing in the catalog today that looks even remotely like it.
Not even close.
Okay, so let's see what's going on in the box. Amit asking, Tim, any recommendations for dual time and world time hybrid watches? Well, depending on your budget, remember the Longa 1 time zone is very clearly that sort of watch. And also, you know, the Nomos Zurich Weltzeit is very much like that. Depending on your budget, Breguet has also worked in that genre with the Oramundi. And of course, there are several different versions of this JLC Geographic. There's the original Geographic from '89, there's the Master Geographic, the Master Compressor Geographic, and if you want a monstrous sports watch that also has a depth meter, the Master Compressor World Diving Pro Geographic. Okay, local hero Ed saying that's more Dalton than Brosnan. Do you have a favorite James Bond?
I like Sean Connery.
Everyone likes Sean Connery. Although there's like this revisionist history now to upgrade like Timothy Dalton's performances as Bond. It was only 2 movies, but for some reason he seems to have his fans. He was an 80s Bond, which makes him appropriate subject matter for this show. Ian Hiscock saying, I could easily see James Bond wearing a 50 Fathoms. I would actually prefer to see that at this point.
I would agree with that.
Blancpain needs all the help it can get. All right, Breitling. This is a weird one. The Navitimer Spaciograph, made from 97 to 2002, with an oddball countdown timer that was supposedly designed for pilots in a landing pattern, but you could see it would tick off minutes and half minutes, and it would count down. I've only seen a handful of these in person, but they're really cool and really different, and it feels like, I guess, peak Breitling of the 90s. Like, this was the peak before the overwrought Breitling for Bentley era that consumed the brand in the 2000s.
I wonder why they chose a fraction and not a decimal.
Well, you know what? They're Swiss, and they probably decided that this was the right way to do it.
Yeah.
Make it as obtuse as possible. Like, why have 0.5 when you can have 1/2?
Yeah, make it even harder to see.
I don't know, maybe the supplier who built the disc was getting paid by the character?
That would explain it.
Neil B. saying, love all James Bonds for different reasons. And Jumbo Jet Pilot saying, my uncle was the sound producer of the James Bond series during the first 20 years. Jim Millett saying, when Tim visits Blancpain, perhaps he can suggest they get a 50 Fathoms on Bond's wrist in the next films. Yeah, right. They're going to take my advice when I say spend $20 million on product placement. I'm sure it's like something along those lines spread out. Over all the movies. If a guy's going to play Bond 4 or 5 times, I wouldn't be shocked if that's like $20 million or franc. And then Vincent saying the countdown display is so cool, and I got to agree, when people have those, they tend not to sell them. Ian Hiscock saying, hey Timmy Tim, welcome. Hope you're well, my friend. I am, better than ever, and I will see you Wednesday on the group. Viewer wrist shots number 4. I asked, you answered. Why don't you run down the wrist shots? Ryan?
So we have Abdul of Germany, shares another new to us watch, his PIaget alarm, a Russian Memovox. Very cool. Elena, shot by her husband, wears the rarely seen here 28mm date just at the pool.
Shurat
S reports from Wimbledon finals with his Patek Philippe 5059. Beautiful. George F wears his Marathon SS Nav watching the Chicago White Sox. Perfect. And Jim R takes us home with his wild shot of his Omega Seamaster Diver 300 on glass. Wow, look at that.
Wow. Man, talk about a watch on ice. And once not diamonds. Guys, thanks so much. Thanks to Ryan joining in. Again,
Thank
Ryan,
you.
if they're just joining in, where can they find you online?
Find me on Instagram, Ryan E. Spalding.
And I want to thank my crew for, as ever, making the magic happen. I think I've got Ethan and Sid back there tonight. Those guys always do a great job. And thanks to you for making the best job in watches possible. Before we leave, I've got something very special to show you. Promised and now promise kept. This is a model launched by Daniel Roth right at the beginning of his Breguet tenure in 1976. This is the 3050 BA, 36 millimeters in diameter in yellow gold, cold rolled case, welded lugs, sapphire cabochon crown, pre-1995 hallmarks, solid gold dial, guilloche cut with a dial layout based on a school watch created by Daniel Roth. This is the definition of a modern day collectible, and it shows every telltale of the master's hand. What a cool piece is that. Guys, thanks so much. Time out, Tim out, Ryan out. And thank you for logging on.
Cheers.